Yes, folks, Trump's impeachment stinks to high heaven. We all know it's been a sham from the beginning. We all know it has been a look over there tactic, a distraction away from the Horowitz report and the upcoming prosecutions that will result from John Durham's investigation. And we all know Nancy Pelosi is delaying handing over the impeachment articles for no other reason than they haven't got a case. And they're scrambling to find another so-called whistleblower or something like that. Anyway, I'll start this off with Chuck Schumer.
Overnight, you released a letter that you wrote to the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell suggesting where you stand on the coming Senate impeachment trial and asking for 4 witnesses to be part of that trial. Those 4 witnesses are Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, John Bolton, the former NASA security advisor, Robert Blair, an advisor to Mulvaney, and Michael Duffy, an OMB official.
And no Rudy Giuliani. I wonder why. Now, the Dems subpoenaed his Ukraine documents for the House impeachment sham. Now, even though Giuliani never handed them over, they still left him off this list. I wonder why. Well, here's why. Hat tip to Make New Zealand Great Again for this one.
For the Democrat impeachment charge against President Trump to hold water, 2 things had to be true for them. 1, Joe Biden and his son Hunter had to have committed no wrongdoing in Ukraine. Otherwise, any investigation by any law enforcer in America would prove to have been a duty. So far in this series, we found multiple crimes in Ukraine the Bidens have committed: extortion, bribery, and money laundering. We also heard compelling evidence indicating the DNC and Ukrainian officials, through Alexandra Chalupa, colluded in 2016 to interfere with elections and conspired to violate U.S. laws. And Giuliani says the best evidence against the Bidens is Joe Biden's own words.
If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a got fired.
Probably prosecuted 20 bribery cases. I know the elements cold. I remember judges charging juries. These are the elements of the crime of bribery. I don't think I've ever seen as concise and as tight and as clear a confession. But worse than that, I saw a confession with proof of guilty knowledge by leaving his son out. We prove intent by lying, lies of omission, lies of commission, because we can't look in somebody's brain. So what we have is we've got the clear crime of bribery. He offered a $1 billion loan guarantee in return to fire a prosecutor. Crime of bribery, that's it, over, already.
While all this is admissible in a court of law, more admissible than anything Schiff has presented so far, there's even stronger testimony to be found. To verify Giuliani's claims, we needed to ask these witnesses ourselves whether the documents they presented to us were legitimate, to verify these documents came from Ukrainian officials. We would go to them, and by our side would be none other than Rudy Giuliani and his brimming briefcase containing hundreds of files pertaining to Biden money laundering and Democrat collusion.
Yeah, so off to Ukraine they went late last year. And here's one of those interviews.
We have Mayor Rudy Giuliani, personal attorney to the president, and former prosecutor general of Ukraine, Viktor Shokin, here in Kiev, Ukraine, meeting for the very first time in person. And we have a lot of questions for Mr. Shokin. We'd love to ask them of you. So thank you for joining us at One American News. Take us back to your career as a prosecutor and how you got into that office and your time there. Take us back to the first time you were appointed to that office. My first obligation was to reform the prosecutor's office, to fight corruption, not just within Ukraine, but within the office itself. We had a number of hot cases. One of them was Burisma. The first half a year, we were doing great, communicating, investigating, coordinating with allies. Shokin says even relations with then Ambassador Pyatt was off to a good start. But at some point, something happened, something changed. The problem began when we started to dig into Burisma. Did Ambassador Pyatt confront you directly about Burisma? Shokin says Ambassador Pyatt's pressure on him was indirect but clear. They went from meeting multiple times a week to not at all. Pyatt even delivered a speech criticizing Shokin's handling of Burisma. For me, says Shokin, it was interesting why an ambassador of a foreign nation was trying to interfere in the investigation of a sovereign country. The Burisma investigation consisted of 3 charges: money laundering, tax evasion, and illegal enrichment for its founder, Mykola Zlochevsky. Shokin says pressure to stop investigating Hunter Biden's Burisma activities then increased, and President Poroshenko personally asked Shokin to wind down the Burisma investigation to appease then Vice President and Obama's Ukraine point man, Joe Biden. As the months passed, more cases and investigations into Burisma sprung up, and President Poroshenko came to Shokin's office and told Shokin the Burisma case was why Joe Biden wouldn't release $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees, money Ukraine needed desperately. Yes, said Shokin, that's what he told me. He came to me and said, you are a patriot of Ukraine. We need this $1 billion. We're at war, and if you are a patriot, you will close this case. My conversation with Poroshenko on this, Shokin says, was in a phone call. It was after we started seizing Burisma assets in Ukraine when Poroshenko called me and said, listen, this all has to stop already. Joe Biden's temper is overflowing. This seizing of Burisma assets, said Poroshenko, was the last straw. Shokin says Poroshenko then paid him a visit in his office, asking for Shokin's resignation. Shokin responded and asked, why do I have to go? I haven't done anything wrong. I'm doing my job. This is standard procedure. We have reason to freeze Burisma assets. And Poroshenko said, Biden is angry about you freezing Burisma assets. I'll figure something out. We asked Shokin if this demand for a resignation was specifically because Biden had asked for it, or if there were other possible reasons. Shokin insists it was all Biden. Because of Biden, says Shokin. Everyone knew what was going on. Poroshenko told me directly that I had to step down as prosecutor general because of Joe Biden. Biden and leftist media claim Shokin was corrupt and inept and had to be dismissed, despite the fact that not a single charge of corruption has ever been raised or proven against Shokin to date. To this, Shokin shrugs. Shokin says people don't have to believe him. Just look at the transcripts. Biden's transcripts, that is. The transcripts of Biden's telephone conversations with Poroshenko, says Shokin, is where the truth will show itself. Americans must demand it. And if they do, they will see, broad as day, Joe Biden was illegally influencing foreign officials in order to protect his son, Hunter, and shield illegal money laundering activities.
Be very interesting to see the transcripts. We've got numerous phone calls from the vice president to Poroshenko. Poroshenko showing up in Shokin's office and saying, Biden's putting pressure on me. You can't go forward with Burisma. Can you slow it down? And all of a sudden, Shokin gets this communique from Latvia that shows a $16 million laundering transaction, classic laundering transaction. It goes from Ukraine to Latvia. It's disguised as a loan to another company, Wire Logic, I believe. It then goes to Cyprus, gets disguised as another loan. This is called Digitech. And then it's dispersed as payment of board fees. Now, you don't make 2 loans to pay board fees unless you're laundering the money. $3 million gets to Hunter Biden that way. That is a straight-out violation of a money laundering statute.
The document referred here is an official letter dated February 2016 from the Prosecutor's Office of the Republic of Latvia, Money Laundering Investigations Division. The letter states, quote, according to publicly available information, Burisma Holding Limited and its director, Hunter Biden, are involved in a corruption affair, end quote. Latvia traced $14.7 million between 2012 and 2015. The funds were transferred back to Burisma to the accounts of Devon Archer and Hunter Biden. When America asked Shokin if he recognized the document, he said he did. and that there were more such inquiries that made it impossible for him to justify simply shutting down the Burisma cases. One American News also verified on camera what Shokin had stated in a stunning 12-page sworn affidavit to an Austrian court. Quote, President Poroshenko asked me to resign due to pressure from the U.S. presidential administration, in particular from Joe Biden, who was the U.S. vice president. Biden was threatening to withhold $1 billion in U.S. subsidies to Ukraine until I was removed from office. Shokin goes on, quote, I was forced out because I was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into Burisma. Joe Biden's son was on the board of directors. I refused to close this investigation. Therefore, I was forced to leave under direct and intense pressure from Joe Biden and the U.S. administration.
Remember, Mr. Shokin, we don't just have to rely on you. Mr. Biden confessed to this. Mr. Biden stood up, I think it was on January 23, 2018, in front of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he said, I told Poroshenko that he had 6 hours to fire that son of a, that's you, or he's not going to get his $1 billion. So in America, we call that a confession.
Of course, if this case were tried in a European Court of Human Rights, this would be an open-shut case. Joe Biden broke Ukrainian law. Article 343 of the Ukrainian Criminal Code covers intervention in the activities of law enforcement officers using coercion, blackmail, threats, and intervention against prosecutors.
Let's go back to the question that Chanel asked before, which is, so you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, there's a universal definition of bribery. The universal definition of bribery is that it's a crime to offer something of value in return for official action.
Yes.
As a lawyer, is it clear to you that's what happened here with Biden?
Of course. I also have an expert legal opinion from Ukrainian parliament stating what Biden did in Ukraine was internal interference in the Ukrainian political system, which is a crime. This testimony directly contradicts proclamations the Bidens committed no wrong.
He did not do a single thing wrong, as everybody's investigated.
Right. Well, he's making up the allegations against the vice president.
Clearly, someone is lying. It seems releasing a transcript of these phone calls between Biden and Poroshenko around the time Shokin was dismissed should clarify much.
So Senator Lindsey Graham has subpoenaed a number of telephone calls and records that basically show that this campaign to get rid of Shokin goes back to at least December 7, 2015. There's a phone call on the logs of the State Department that says the vice president calls Poroshenko, and according to the leak, so I can't be sure, it says to dismiss Shokin. So this is one of the FOIA requests that was made by John Solomon that the Justice Department, the State Department is resisting. But now Senator Graham has subpoenaed it and said to Mike Pompeo, why are you holding this up? I mean, if it doesn't say it, we should know it. But there's definitely a phone call between Biden and Poroshenko on December 7th. 2 days later, Biden's son and his partner, Devin Archer, later convicted of insider trading, meet at the State Department concerning Burisma.
That meeting was with a man named Tony Blinken, the number 2 at the State Department.
Now, folks, One American News and Giuliani interviewed 2 more people. A guy named Yuri Lutenko, who replaced Shokin as Ukraine's prosecutor general, and a guy named Andrei Derkish, who sits on Ukraine's budget committee, both of whom expose the Bidens and Democrat corruption. Anyway, I've posted a link to that video in the description below, and it's well worth watching.